Thank you, Brandon. Good to be with you, and good to have this question on the board for us to ask. And the graphic, I hope you've noticed and looked in closely at it, that there are some small words that are through all of this, like squash or backbiting or defame or belittle or knock, slam, scorn, slander, rip, diminish. A lot of hostile words, a lot of hostility in our culture right now as people are debating a lot of these topics. And it causes the question to be brought up of, are Christians anti-science and anti-education? Well, I want to begin by saying some things just to be very, very clear about this. First is that Christians are not supportive of everything that is done in the name of science. We will admit to that. So to say that Christians are not anti-science, and yet to say it doesn't mean that we are gullible or that we buy everything. And the truth of the matter is, on just almost any topic you can pick, there will be scientists who are saying different things among themselves. So to say, don't you believe what science says? Well, I could give you the names of several scientists who disagree with each other. So there's not just one thing that Christians might disagree with, but Christians are not supportive of everything that's done in the name of science. Secondly, Christians are not supportive of everything done in the name of education. There's a lot of educational theory out there, a lot of things that have been tried. One of the truest things in the field of education is that whatever is today, it's not going to be here tomorrow. It will be changed. There will be new studies. Have you seen what the latest research says? And so there will be all kinds of adaptations that are made and new things that are tried. A progressive field that is always reaching for ways to teach better, to understand better. Christians are not supportive of everything that's done in the name of education. And I think it needs to be said to understand and appreciate those first two statements that Christians are not supportive of everything done in the name of Christianity. There are many things that are done in the name of Christianity that I am 100% opposed to. I am a Christian. I have given my life to Jesus. I want to walk in his steps. I want to revere God and count him as holy in my life. But that does not mean that I am a standing yes vote for everything that anybody wants to say in the name of Christianity. So all of this taken together just simply says, let's think and let's reason together. And let's be honest about what we're talking about. And let's ask the next question. Instead of like that screen that was up here at the very beginning, instead of our being ready always just to go to blows with people about things, instead let's ask the question and find out really what they're saying. And let's explain ourselves in really what we're saying. And I believe that a lot of times we can find more common ground than we think for at first. For 7 years, I was the president of a Christian university, Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. And it is a university that is accredited by the Higher Learning Commission. The Higher Learning Commission is the same accrediting body that accredits the Ohio State University, whose campus we are recording this tonight. So the same people who say that this is a legitimate educational experience here at the Ohio State University are the ones who accredited our institution at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. The university I served had a robust and very respectable college of education. It had a very robust and respected college of engineering and sciences. Our graduates were in high demand in every direction. People going to medical schools, going into the allied health fields, going into research, people going on to do doctoral work, students who were respected in the academic arena very highly, who had gone through a Christian university, a university that says at the very beginning that we are at our core a Christian university. And so the belief that God is and that God has revealed himself, those things are core and are central. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a college of education or that we don't have laboratories. It doesn't mean that we don't have science classes. These are things instead that we believe there is a way to integrate faith and learning. They're not things that move in opposite directions, but it's something that we believe that for a Christian, it is, it is something that inspires us, moves us, challenges us in moving on and pursuing the sciences and pursuing education. As Christians, we believe that we have been called to love the Lord our God with all of our heart and soul and mind and strength. Christians are called to be a thinking people, a people who engage our minds in what would be described as the sciences, in trying to understand the world that we live in trying to understand one another, and trying to understand governments, and trying to understand all sorts of things. We are applying the mind that God gave us to understanding this world in which we live. Here are the instructions as our instructions as Christians for living in a time such as ours. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. In your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect. How different is this from the spirit of our day? We're talking about education and sciences right here. We're talking about religion. We're talking about faith. We're talking about all of these things. But instead of like that opening screen that had those words, those hostile, battling words thrown up there, instead of the image of boxing gloves and let's go after each other, notice what's said here. Christians in the very first century were called upon, honor Christ as Lord, the Lord as holy. These are devout people. These are people who believe in God, who believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And then this language of always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you. It doesn't say be defensive. It doesn't say be hostile. It doesn't say be arrogant. But it does say be ready to make a defense. Engage the mind. Be ready to explain why it is that we believe what we do and say what we say. So it's not be defensive, but it's be ready to make a defense. Very different things here. And it's people are going to see that we are different and they will ask a reason for the hope that is within us. Maybe my favorite part of this passage is the very end where it says, yet do it with gentleness and respect. There is a way to engage philosophical arguments. There is a way to engage academic debate that is hostile and that is nasty. And there's a way to do things like that, though, that is done with gentleness and respect. Treating people with respect, handling them gently, but being very firm, clear, confident about what it is that we have to defend. The collision of the ideas that gives rise to the subject for this evening is something that I experienced in the first and second grade. I'd like to share with you what it was like for me, first and second grade. I remember becoming aware of church and of faith at about that age. I remember especially Sunday nights. We lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, and my family of 4 children, my mom and dad, with it, we attended the Pulaski Heights Church of Christ. I remember on Sunday nights, I still can close my eyes and I can remember the smell and I can remember the feelings. And I remember that God seemed so near that it was like I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. And I had the sense that when we bowed our heads and prayed, it was like God leaned forward to hear our prayers. We were praying right into the ear of God. I remember that when we sang, I had the sense of God's delight in hearing what our hearts were lifting up in song. I remember what it was. It was like to hear the preacher walk into the pulpit, open a Bible, and he brought a message from God. God was the explanation of it all. God was at the center of it all. God was the reason that we were alive, and the reason that we were there, and the reason that we had come there to worship. I remember first and second grade, Little Rock, Arkansas, Sunday nights, God being so near that I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. Church would be over. We would hug our friends and we'd leave, and we'd load up into the station wagon and we would head home. And our family typically would stop on the way home at Shipley Donuts. Mom would get out of the car and go in and get some hot donuts while we watched the man tossing the donut dough in the window. She'd get back in the car. Again, I could close my eyes. I could still smell those donuts. And we would get in the car and we'd head home. Mom and Dad almost always had invited someone to go home with us. And it was a really good night for me if the folks they invited had kids. And so we'd get home, they'd make coffee, serve the kids some hot donuts and some milk, and we'd go off into the living room and watch TV. And there on the TV, we would watch, typically, The Wonderful World of Disney. Now, if you were about my age and you grew up going to church on Sunday nights, you never saw the first 15 minutes of The Wonderful World of Disney, but you saw the rest of it. And it was an especially wonderful night if when we were watching this, if it was one of those old classic cartoons or movies. Oftentimes, though, it was a science feature. And it would be the running of the wildebeest, or it would be a study of volcanoes, or it would be something about the stars, or fish way down deep in the ocean. And it would be some scientific thing that we were watching. I didn't have words to put with what was happening to me on those Sunday nights for several decades later. But as a 7, 8-year-old, I was experiencing worldview whiplash. When I had been at church earlier in the evening, I was a part of a world where the worldview was theism. It was the belief in God. God is the explanation of all that is. God created. God made us. We are in the image of God. We live accountable before God. God is the center and the thing that holds everything together. We got in the car, went by Shipley Donuts, went home and sat in front of a television set, and as a 7-year-old, I'm confronted with an entirely different worldview. The Wonderful World of Disney was all about materialism and naturalism. Now, they never said that, but they were describing a world where the material was all that there was. They were describing a world where natural processes, not supernatural processes, were the explanation of all of life. Now, a 7-year-old kid sitting there just trying to enjoy Disney on a Sunday night, and yet I was confronted with dramatically different world views. There were people who believed that there is a bias against the supernatural, and I had just come from a world where the supernatural was the explanation of absolutely everything. Disney never said there was no God. They never attacked the notion of God in any kind of a direct way. But they described a world where God had been removed from the discussion before the discussion ever started. And so there's no way to engage God and what's going on because, well, we don't talk about God, which is materialism and naturalism. That's the bias that's there. We don't talk about God. God's not in the room as we're trying to understand this created world and all that's going on in this. Well, Carl Sagan also would come along, and a few years later with Cosmos, he was fond of saying, the cosmos is all there is, or ever was, or ever will be. Sagan was an astronomer. And what he says right there, again, is materialism, naturalism. It is a bias against the supernatural. His statement right there, he doesn't say God. He doesn't have to say God. It's obvious he's describing a world, the cosmos, without God. He doesn't need God to describe the cosmos. The cosmos is all there is, or ever was, or ever will be. James Davidson Hunter, in his book, The Death of Character, and Hunter is the LaBrosse Levinson Distinguished Professor of Religion, Culture, and Social Theory at the University of Virginia. I wanted to get all of that exactly right. So, a professor at the University of Virginia, highly esteemed in his field for his culture studies and the philosophy of religion and such things. In his book, The Death of Character, he describes how he says within academic discussion, through the work of such people as Erik Erikson and Benjamin Spock and Carl Rogers and B.F. Skinner and Chaim Gounod and Rudolf Dreikurs, psychology as a field to explain, as one of the sciences, and a field to explain moral life and understanding. He says, psychology had no rival as a way to think about moral life and understanding. Notice this last sentence. Religious tradition was not so much attacked and debunked as it was explained, rationalized, and thus trivialized. And one of the biases for a lot of people involving education and the sciences is if you can explain something, then you are the master of that. If you can say, okay, I understand how this works, then we no longer need God to explain this, and it's something that I speak with authority on. Religion as in general, it was not so much attacked or debunked as it was explained, rationalized, and thus trivialized. That's the world we live in. And that's the collision that oftentimes happens in the sciences, and it happens in the larger field of education. A dear friend of mine, Dr. Don England, has given me a meaningful way, a very helpful way to me personally, to conceptualize how a Christian can be a scientist or an educator at a time when our worldviews are so often in great conflict. Dr. England, in his book, God, Are You Really There?, that I'll reference here in just a moment, he taught organic chemistry and biochemistry at Harding University for 45 years. I never took organic chemistry, never took biochemistry. I wasn't terrified of them, but I respected them greatly as how difficult those classes could be. Dr. Don England, one of the brightest people I've ever known in my life. And he wrote this very down-to-earth and very helpful book, God, Are You Really There? And he writes in that book, he says, when I entered college as an 18-year-old Christian, aspiring to major in the sciences, I was naive to expect that everything I would learn in science would support Christian faith. Many things I learned did reinforce faith, but I also encountered areas of disagreement. If we correctly understand the nature of both science and Christian faith, we will not be surprised that conflicts sometimes exist. These conflicts need not be disastrous to faith. I wish that statement could be given to everybody who is entering university, that you are going to encounter things that are going to rock your world. You're going to encounter things that are going to challenge your faith. Not everything, but you're going to encounter some things. And these conflicts do not need to be disastrous to faith. He has a chart. It's so simple, and yet it is profound in its impact. As we think about being a Christian dealing with science and education, it begins, this chart does, with the subject, conflict and agreement in science and faith, and talks about the truths of nature and the truths of the Bible. And he says we need to start by saying there's no conflict here, that there are all kinds of truths about this natural world in which we live, all kinds of truths about the heavens and about the earth and about the human body and about so many, many things that we study at a university. We have these truths of nature. And then we have the truths of the Bible. And he says, I don't believe there's a bit of conflict there. The next slide shows that the science is what studies the truths of nature. And that says university to a lot of us. But science is constantly studying the truths of nature. Bible study, individual, church Bible study. Bible study engages the truths of the Bible, seeking to discern what those things are. What does the Bible say about this? And people talk about it and they discuss it and they debate it. And probably a lot of atheists would be very surprised to find how robust the discussion is among Christians, trying to understand what is the Bible saying about X, Y, or Z. And then the best part, I think, of this little chart, he says, and then science comes up with interpretations of nature. And Bible study comes up with interpretations of the Bible. And in this area, there oftentimes are conflicts. The next slide sort of highlights this. And so this is where the conflict is. And if you and I can see that this is where so much of the battle is going on, and then we can back up and see the bigger picture, I think it makes a whole lot of sense for us to see, okay, this is where conflict is. The conflict is between interpretation of nature and interpretation of the Bible. And the problem can be on either side, or it can be on both sides. There can be a problem here. But we can still, even at that time, dealing with the conflicts and all, we can still be confident. And I believe in this, that the truths of nature and the truths of the Bible are not conflict. Now, one of the things that is called for here, and we'll say a little more about this a little bit later, but one of the things that's called for here is a little more humility on the part of everyone. So that when we are doing battle right here, it may be that we need to back up and say, I need to look and see how confident I can really be of what I'm saying here. And that's something that can be said on both sides. We may be misinterpreting the Bible. We may be misinterpreting the data of what we are studying right here. One final word about my friend, Dr. Don England. The Science and Engineering Building at Harding University is today named the Dr. Joseph Pryor and Dr. Don England building for the College of Engineering and Science. And this picture right here, this is Dr. England, and this picture right here is in a hallway that connects two critical buildings on the Harding University campus. The photographer in this picture is standing in the College of Bible building, the McIntyre College of Bible building, taking this picture, and behind Dr. England, you are walking into the College of Science and Engineering building. So you have these two buildings that are next to each other. And when the science building was built, Dr. Don England requested that this text from Colossians chapter 2, verse 3, be put up above the door as you're walking out of the Bible building and into the science building. It's a passage that he had written on a piece of paper that was under glass in his office for many years in his 45-year career of teaching. In Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Isn't that an incredible passage to have over the door as you're walking in to study science? as you're walking in to study chemistry, as you're walking in to study biology, as you're walking in to study anatomy, as you're walking in to study the sciences, that many people in the world would think you are now leaving Bible, you are walking into the land of atheism. Instead, Dr. England, I think rightly so, says this is the verse that belongs up there. In Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. I may not understand all of those, but I operate with the conviction that those things are hidden in Christ. Colossians chapter 2 and verse 3. I want to conclude this evening my comments by looking at Psalm 19. It's been described by some people as God's big book and God's little book. And God's big book is the universe. It's the sciences. It's this world that we research. The psalmist David said, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day by day pours out speech, and night by night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the ends of the heavens, and its circuit to the ends of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat." The world, the heavens, declare the glory of God. This world that we live in so many ways, says the hand that made us is divine. In this psalm, that's God's big book. And then the psalmist transitions in verse 7 and begins to talk about God's little book, spiritual revelation, the revelation of Scripture. The law of the Lord, law meaning the teaching. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them there is great reward. Who can discern his errors? Declare me innocent from hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sin. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall be blameless and innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. It's a bringing together of the things that we're talking about on this occasion. We're talking about God's big book and his little book, and then we go to that last slide that speaks of humility. Humility, and it's the big thing that's needed on all sides. We need to stop throwing words, and instead we need to start humbling ourselves before God, saying, yours is the creation, and Lord, I may not fully understand all that is.